News desk, we continue with the broadcast. Now, the cash crisis facing counties is set to persist longer as a bicameral committee of parliament constituted to unlock the division of Revenue Bill 2019 stalemate failed to reach a consensus during its inaugural sitting. We now want to link up with our reporter Murimi Mwangi, who is in parliament, for an update on this stalemate. Murimi Mwangi, over to you.
Thank you, Jesse, and good afternoon. Well, that sitting was adjourned for a week yesterday, and the committee reconvenes on Wednesday next week, hopefully with a solution, because many recommendations were given yesterday on the solution. But as that happens, the crisis continues in the counties, with a number of county government workers going on strike over the delay in payment of their July salaries. But let's interrogate some of these recommendations that came from the committee yesterday, and to help me do that is Bungoma Senator Moses Wetangula. Senator, crisis continues in the counties, and no solution in sight in terms of a consensus on this matter, on the division of revenue bill. A few suggestions came from the mediation committee yesterday, but before we get to some of them, what do you think should be the way forward? Because each of these two houses appears to stick to the position that the figure they have is what should sell through ultimately after the mediation.
I did recommend in the last sitting of the Senate before we recessed that the national government and the county government should approach this matter in a live and let live mentality. What we're having now is live and let die mentality taken by the national government. Now, sequentially, under the 2010 Constitution, there must be DORA before you have an appropriations bill, because the Kenya Revenue Authority collects revenue, puts on the table, then advises the Commission for Revenue Allocation, CRA, that this is what we have. Taking into account all the factors, including revenue collection growth and so on, then CRA will divide that money between the national government and the county government. It is only on the basis of that division that appropriations can be done for the national government through the National Assembly and for counties through their county assemblies. There's no DORA. Yet we have an unconstitutionally passed and unconstitutionally ascended to appropriations bill. So in fact, the expenditure are being undertaken by the national government is also open to constitutional challenge, because it's not based on a proper legal constitutional framework.
Let's vet some of the suggestions that came from that mediation committee yesterday. And I'll start with a suggestion that came from your colleague in the Senate, Ledama Olekina, that if you look at the ministries, the parent ministries that are handling functions that are devolved, you could go to the same ministries, check out some money, then give it to the counties, and if the issue in question is accountability, let that money go to the conditional grants, and then the ministry to supervise implementation of that money for the specific projects. Is it something viable?
I don't even want to go that route myself. My thinking is very clear that if the CRA has recommended, there is a basis for that recommendation, a scientific basis. They have looked at last year's performance in revenue collection. They have looked at the expenditures of both levels of government. They have looked at reports from the control of budget. And they have said, according to figures available, there was even revenue growth, serious revenue growth, which means that the counties must also benefit from this growth. Having said that, then they say, we calculate and we recommend the 335 billion go to counties, then they will appropriate this accordingly. The rest is left to the national government. I know that there is a lot of devolved functions that are still domiciled in the ministries of water, in the ministries of health, in the ministries of agriculture and so on. That is a story for another day. We are dealing with issues of division of revenue as recommended by CRA. It is not a question of, I'll give you this, take it or leave it, or I've given you this, nitakuongezea this much. It is not a question of benevolence. It's a question of scientific constitutional calculation by a body that is mandated by the Constitution to do so.
Now, there's a warning from the National Assembly Majority Leader Aden Duale that you as senators are taking a dangerous route, and the budget-making process having been completed, save for the division of revenue bill, and departments in government having appropriated money for the specific use for which it is to be used for, that for you now to chuck money from any of the government departments or any other arm of government, be it parliament or the judiciary, would necessitate a sit down with the accounting officers from each of these other sources of revenue that you as senators say the money can come from. Is it something practical, given that the crisis is still there in the counties?
That argument is totally misplaced. Totally misplaced, because I've already told you that the appropriations bill that they misled the president to assent to is unconstitutional, because it's not based on DORA. It is one after the other. Secondly, the argument being put forward by the likes of Honorable Duale and others is just self-serving. They're trying to defend an unconstitutional position that they have already taken and misled the country into. We are actually in a very unprecedented constitutional crisis. If people don't see this, then our adherence to the rule of law and constitutionalism comes into question. It requires action at the highest level. This is a situation where the president himself should call a meeting from the leadership and the senior members, ranking members of both houses, to sit down and discuss this. Why has the president been misled into signing an unconstitutional appropriations bill? Those who have done so must take responsibility. They have flouted the very constitution they swore to defend, protect, and uphold. This is a serious matter. And it's not a laughing matter where now people say, we've already started spending, we cannot release the money. You are spending what you don't have and what the law hasn't given you. So that expenditure is a nullity. And in a proper constitutional setup, people will have to be held to account. Yes.
Let me ask you finally a question that every Kenyan out there is asking. It's been 6 years of devolution. Counties have mechanisms of collecting money within, the counties. Why this reliance on, the shareable revenue from the national government instead of enhancing mechanisms for local revenue collection?
You're forgetting, Murimi, that even the revenue that the national government collects through KRA is collected from counties. If you are to leave counties to collect all those revenues, then they would not be having a problem. But the philosophy of devolution, as you probably know, right from the days of Bomas and so on, was that counties will move to a level where some of them may generate so much revenue that they will be obligated to give some to the center to be distributed to those that are weak. We haven't reached there yet. Today, we're talking of the junk of revenue being collected by the national government. What are they collecting in the counties? Chicken sellers, charcoal sellers, busa brewers, stock traders, and so on. The real revenue is collected by the national government. And the real revenue must be shared between the two levels of government. And I want to urge President Uhuru Kenyatta that the situation we're having today has never visited on this country before, except in 1966. Where the national government set up Majimbo for destruction, and the process eventually killed Majimbo and brought the country to a unitary state. Unless this is the direction that some people want to take, which will be completely against the majority of the wishes of Kenyans who voted for this constitution because they wanted devolution, they wanted to take control of their management of resources, development, and all other matters in their counties. That is what Kenyans wanted, and that is what we must not let go.
Thank you so much. Senator Moses Wetangula assisting us understand some of the issues in the stalemate on the division of revenue bill. The committee reconvenes on Wednesday next week. A lot of backroom negotiations expected in the meantime as we await perhaps a consensus on Wednesday or an extension of the stalemate. Jesse.
Murimi Mwangi, we definitely hope for consensus even as county activities are grinding to a halt, which have been affected due to this standoff on the Division of Revenue Bill. Proper pointers right there, just delving into the recommendations that were brought forth during the Parliamentary Team Mediation Committee that had a sit-in yesterday. And as Murimi Mwangi has put it, they're expected to meet next week, Wednesday, just to finalize, hopefully, on the issues that are arising around this particular standoff. Let's move on. The National Assembly, in consultation with the Senate, are considering speeding up the proposed amendments to the Public Finance Management Act in efforts to solve the revenue standoff between the two houses of a county revenue allocation. The bill seeks to allow counties to access funds should a disagreement on the proposed amount persist, as is currently happening. KTN's Caroline B. now reports.
A second attempt by two houses of parliament to find a solution into the Division of Revenue Bill once again failed to reach a consensus. Following the development, the National Assembly, in consultation with the Senate, plans to quicken the amendment to the Public Finance Management Act once the members are back from recess to permit counties access up to 15% of revenue allocation.
Saka and myself will consult and see to it that that bill for the amendment of the PFM Act to allow for this mechanism to settle is fast-tracked.
So this continued impasse of division of revenue means that some counties are basically shut down. I've met some governors who say, "Ata hakuna haja ya kwenda ofisi." There's nothing much happening, especially counties that do not really have a resource base.
A mediation committee made up of 18 legislators is set to hold its second meeting next week after it failed to reach consensus on Tuesday.
I think it was not wise to leave the Division of Revenue Bill to the vagaries of mediation. Any bill that goes through mediation, there can either be agreement, there can be, and with some amendments, either the committee agrees or the houses themselves disagree, even if the committee agrees, and if they disagree, the bill fails.
We need a lasting solution to this. I think we are going to have a conversation where we are not going to get into this kind of stalemate every year. We must address the constitutional challenges that are there so that this is sorted out once and for all.
The good work that is done.
The leaders were speaking during the release of the end-of-term report of the Controller of Budget, Agnes Odhiambo. The report makes suggestions to improve the running of the public sector and highlights achievements by Odhiambo during her 8-year tenure.
We need to expedite automation of the exchequer process. I know the national government is done, but please expedite the automation for the counties.
She also highlighted the hostile relationship between the county assemblies and their executives as reason for delay in approval of budgets, coupled with weak governance structures in internal auditing. The office also noted the surging pending bills in counties, which could be solved if counties found additional ways of generating their own revenue. Agnes Odhiambo's 8-year term in office comes to an end this month. Caroline B.